Hello there. Yes, good day, and thank you so much for clicking again this video. And yes, for today we are going to have our lesson number 2, grade 9, quarter 1, art of sculpture. So if you can remember, last time we already had our first lesson in arts, and that's all about the Western arts or Western classical arts traditions, but we only focus on paintings. Okay, and for today, we are going to focus on sculpture. Still, Western classical arts traditions, but focused on sculpture. Okay, but before we continue with our lesson, or before we continue with lesson number 2, let us have a short review. So this time, I am going to show you some pictures. Well, pictures of the paintings that we studied before, so I want you to look at the pictures and tell me anything that you remember about them, like the period they were created, or where they were found, or something about them, their purpose and all. Okay? Okay, now let's continue. So let us have the first picture. Okay, so what can you say about this first picture? Okay, so it's a prehistoric painting found in the cave of Lascaux. And the main purpose of these kinds of paintings was to communicate, because during that time, no internet connection, no radio. So the main purpose was to communicate with other people. Okay, now let's continue. How about the next one? Okay, so this is, yes, a, a painting from ancient Egyptian period. Oh, I'm sorry for this. Okay, so ancient Egyptian period, and yes, wait, sorry. Okay, ancient Egyptian picture, and yes. So the main purpose of ancient Egyptian paintings was to, yes, tell the people about the life of the king or the pharaoh, and also to anticipate the the afterlife experience of that king or that pharaoh. And usually these ones can be found inside the tomb, all right? And this painting was from the sarcophagus of Tutankhamen. Okay, how about the next one? Yes, so this painting is on a vase, and therefore classical Greek era painting. Yes, and classical Greek era paintings again can be found on vases, panel woods or wood panels. Okay, and also about battles or Greek battles and mythology. Okay, and the last picture, yes, we have here a painting from Roman era. Okay, so Roman era paintings are more of landscapes, portraits, okay, also mythology. And again, we know that Romantic era paintings are paintings that um, are dramatic and show emotions. Okay, now are you ready? So for today we are going to have our lesson. We're done with our review. So let's have our lesson for today. So for today we are going to talk about art of sculpture. This presentation explores the fascinating journey through three main periods of sculpture, examining their characteristic, notable examples, and cultural significance across time. Okay, so let's have the first one. So we are going to talk about early age sculptures. So again, early age sculptures have abstract forms, emphasizing symbolic representation over realistic portrayals of the human figure. Just like paintings or prehistoric paintings that are actually more of an artifact rather than human creativity. Also same with this, also same with the early age sculptures that are actually more of a symbolic representation rather than realistic portrayals of human figures. So later you're going to see them. And then also, artists use a large or a range of materials, including bones, stone, and clay. Because, of course, during that time, we didn't have materials that are used for sculptures nowadays, like marbles and so on. So before, they just use bones, stone, and clay, showcasing their creativity and resourcefulness in early cultures. Next one is cultural rituals. So these sculptures often played important roles in cultural rituals in ceremonies, okay, serving as offerings, totems, or representations of gods or deities in early societies. And then we have here prehistoric sculptures. So under early age sculptures, we have prehistoric sculptures. As I said, materials used in sculptures vary according to region and locality. Archaeologists believe that their sculpture is a result of natural erosion and not of human artistry. Frequently, carving may have mythological or religious significance, just like, for example, here. So, one of the most popular um, prehistoric sculpture is the Venus of Willendorf. So, it was found in Willendorf, a village in Lower Austria. So, it is carved with or from limestone with excessively heavy breasts and abdomen used as a charm to ensure fertility. So it's a sort of like a symbolic representation of fertility, able to give birth, and motherhood. So it's one of the most popular and widespread interpretations of the Venus of Willendorf. So it's more of femininity, symbolic representation of femininity and abundance of the ability to give birth for mothers. Okay, the next one is another Venus, but this time Venus of Bressempoi. So it was discovered in a cave at Bressempoi, France in 1894. So it's like about 25 years old, and a sculpture of a lady with a hood. But actually, the Venus at Besempoy was believed to be unsexed, meaning to say not a lady, not a gentleman, not a man. Okay, that's according to an archaeologist. Although it is usually called a Venus, which means a lady, but then it is believed that it's unsexed. Okay, it is a fragmentary ivory figurine from the Upper Paleolithic era that realistically represents the human face and hairstyle. Okay, and it's actually the first representation or earliest known representation of a human face. Okay, next let's move on to the sculptures from the Egyptian era. So here, again, sculptures from the Egyptian era, just like sculptures from the early age, it's for symbolic representation. So Egyptian sculptures often depict gods and pharaohs, reflecting their religious beliefs and societal culture. So before I forget, in the paintings, okay, on the paintings of Egyptian or ancient Egyptian era, there's like the symbolic representation of God. And usually their gods during the ancient Egyptian era um were represented by an animal head and then a human body, something like that. Okay, so Egyptian sculptures um are also same. Okay, it often depicts gods and pharaohs reflecting their religious belief and societal culture. Okay, monumental size. Many sculptures were created on a grand scale, like life-size sculptures, signifying the power and importance of the figures they represented. However, not all are in grand scale or monumental size. As I mentioned before, in ancient Egyptian paintings, usually when it's all powerful, like for example, the sculpture or the painting is representing God, then that's large enough. That's the largest one to be followed by a king or a pharaoh, smaller but still large, smaller than God, and then the followers or the servants of the kings, of course, are the smallest figures. Okay, so it's like the god, then the king, and the followers. Okay, so it depends on the power, or it signifies the power and importance of the figures they represented. All right. And then, yes, so again, Egyptian era sculpture symbolic elements were widely used, such as forms, hieroglyphics, okay, the symbols or the characters, relative size, location, materials, colors, actions, and gestures. So their tombs required the most extensive use of sculpture. So before you enter the tomb, usually you can see outside the sculptures of God or the sculptures of the pharaoh and kings. The most common materials used for sculptures are wood, ivory, and stones. Okay, next one is Queen Nefertiti. So this one is a painted limestone, realistic with heavy lidded eyes. So if you notice, this one is more realistic than the first two, than this one, than Venus of Willendorf and Venus of Bresenpoy. So as you can notice here, Queen Nefertiti is more colorful, okay, with eyebrows, and then with nose, with mouth already, and with even earrings. And also with accessories, like for example, the tattoo or necklace, and then the crown, okay, the headdress, okay. And queen refers to the great royal wife of the Egyptian pharaoh. Actually, Queen Nefertiti was the most popular queen in ancient Egypt times or era. Okay, now next one is the Pharaoh Menkaure and his queen. It is a famous example of old kingdom Egyptian art, specifically from the fourth dynasty. It says there 2548 to 2530 BC. It's an example of portraits presented in rigid, strict posture and were simple and powerful, with very little show of private emotion. So the statue is known for its serene, powerful representation of the royal couple, showcasing the ideals of beauty prevalent during that era. Okay, so the sculpture embodies the ideals of royal power and divinity, reflecting the Egyptian belief in the afterlife and the pharaoh's eternal, forever presence. Okay? So the statue or this statue, the Pharaoh Menkaure and his queen, was discovered in Menkaure's pyramid complex at Giza and now housed in Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Okay, and the next one, the third period, we have here classical period. So here, during this period, okay, sculptors aim for lifelike representations. There's realism in art, capturing human anatomy and emotions with enhanced detail and precision. So exact size, exact measurement, okay, especially of human anatomy. Notable examples, famous sculptures like Venus de Milo and
The discobolus exemplify the artistic mastery and creativity during this era. So the cultural significance, these sculptures reflected societal values, celebrating humanism and the beauty of the human form, influencing future generations. Okay, so here's an example, Myron the Discobolus. So the Discobolus of Myron is a famous ancient Greek sculpture created by sculptor Myron, okay, depicting a youthful athlete, as you can see, about to throw a discus. So it's a key example of classical Greek art known for capturing the dynamism and ideal human form. So as you can see here, it shows an altitude of maximum tension, full of compressed energy and about to explode an action, about to throw a discus. So even if we don't see him throwing the discus, but when we see the sculpture, we can imagine that he's going to throw the discus anytime during this moment. Okay, so that's the main focus of the classical Greek era, to capture the dynamism. Okay, while the original bronze sculpture of this is lost, but it survives through many Roman marble copies. Okay, so this is only a copy. Okay, and under classical era or under classical period of sculptures, we have Roman sculptures. So most Roman sculptures are made of monumental terracotta. Terracotta is a type of earthenware clay, typically brownish red in color, that is fired at low temperatures. So it's known for its durability and versatility. Okay, and is commonly used in pottery, sculpture, and even architectural elements. So most Roman sculptures are made again of monumental terracotta. And they did not attempt to compete with the freestanding Greek works of history or mythology, but rather they produce reliefs in the great Roman columns with continuous narrative reliefs around. Okay, and then we have here an example. So this is an example of the sarcophagus of the spouses. As you can see here, it's made of terracotta, the brownish red clay, and then a husband and wife. And they are shown reclining comfortably as if they were on a couch. So as you can see, below them was the remains of this couple. Okay, and then the next one we have Byzantine sculpture. So the dominant themes in Byzantine sculptures are religious, everyday life scene, and motifs from nature. Animals such as doves, deer, and peafowl served as symbols, while some writings featured acrostics, messages formed by combining the first letters or syllables of different lines holding significant theological meaning. So it's an example. So here we have an early example of Byzantine ivory work. So this is known as the Barberini ivory. It's a Byzantine ivory panel from the first half of the 6th century. Next one we have here the Romanesque sculpture. So some of the famous cultural pieces are reliquaries. When we say reliquaries, a container for holy relics. They usually we can see in the churches. Altar frontals, crucifixes, and devotional images. Small individual works of art were generally made of costly material for royal and aristocratic patrons. And yes, this is an example. Wait for a moment. Sorry. This is an example. The Last Judgment. It's an altar frontal. Okay, and the sculpture is signed Gislebertus hoc Vicit, which means the Gislebertus made this. So it was signed, signature by the sculptor, confirming the sculptor's identity in a way that is uncommon in the medieval era. So it's uncommon, but still the sculptor of this signed it. Christ is in the center, as you can see here. Christ is in the center of the composition in a mandorla or almond shaped frame. Below Christ, the dead are rising and they line up to have their religious souls weigh. An angel here with a trumpet summons all creatures to judgments. And then we can also see here angels and demons fight at the scales where souls are being weighed. So as you can see, these are already very detailed. And again, this is an example of Romanesque sculpture. And then the next one here we have Gothic sculptures. Okay, Gothic sculptures have a greater freedom of style. So they no longer lay closely against the wall, unlike this one, for example. Okay, sculptures on the wall. But this one, Gothic sculptures have greater freedom style, no longer lay closely against the wall, but began to project outward. Figure were given their own particular attitudes instead of being set into a particular pattern and are more lively and realistic. Example of that is the resurrection of the Virgin. So as you can see here, end of the 12th century or 12th century cathedral Amiens. Okay, and then yeah, so there you go. So key periods in sculpture. These overview highlights major sculpture periods and their significance. Early age, primitive forms and themes, Egyptian era, monumental art and spirituality, classical period, realism and humanism flourished. Cultural impact reflected societal values and beliefs. Okay, so anyway, yeah, for my students, so here is a compare and contrast. Choose two sculptures from the different era. Compare and contrast two using the following indicators: name of sculpture, period when it was created, material use, and the use of elements of arts and the sculpture. Okay, so that's it for now. I'm really sorry because the rain is pouring down. So again, for my students, see you next time. And for those who are not my students, thank you so much for watching this video and I hope you learned something. So that's all for today and goodbye.